All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Thursday, November 16th. F it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. And Clayton, we're giddy. We're giddy.
Yeah.
We teased the audience on our last episode. We said this man's schedule is as hectic as anyone's in the entire world, and so we couldn't guarantee it. But he came through. Here he is. The box office daddy is back. Scott Mendelson has returned to the BO Boys. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Happy to be here. It's been a while.
It's been a while, and a lot has happened. Yeah, we were figuring out it was sometime late, midsummer was the last time we talked. So a lot has happened since then.
It was right after the Barbenheimer weekend.
That's right.
Yes.
So since Barbenheimer, I mean, this is the year, and it's weird saying this after the Captain Marvel failed, but I would say this is the year of girl power at the box office, because since Barbenheimer, Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, the movie, dominated. So, we want to get some quick thoughts from you. Did Taylor Swift save movie theaters this fall?
Not long term. I mean, it certainly
Kept them
gave
afloat.
the theaters a kick in the ass that they otherwise wouldn't have had. Frankly, I'm not even sure that Dune 2 would have pulled in that kind of money, at least domestically. Worldwide's a different conversation. Because what's going to do about what's that, like 175 or something at the moment?
Yeah. Dune, the first Dune did 100. Yeah,
the first Dune did $108 million, and the second one probably would have done more, but how much more? Which is sort of an open question. I mean, I've always been of the opinion it wasn't that impacted by the whole HBO Max day and date Project Popcorn stuff, just because films like Conjuring 3 and Godzilla v Kong did as well, if not better, than they otherwise would have done, even with that in place. And even overseas, where everybody was understandably concerned about piracy, not that there's no piracy in America, but whatever, it's not like the film dropped like a rock overseas as soon as it became available on HBO Max. It stuck around even those overseas territories. So it's possible the film did as well as would have been expected, which in non-COVID times, honestly, not quite a hit. I mean, we're talking, Golden Compass numbers here.
So Taylor Swift, that was I guess a solid win for the box office, trading Dune 2 down the line and getting Taylor Swift. But I mean, let's get your take on what happened this past weekend. So we had the Marvels opened up, and what was the final number after all the hand-wringing?
47, I think.
46, 47.
It ended up going in 46. Yeah,
46.
Okay.
So listen, way under what anyone would have thought it would have done a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago when it was greenlit. So, I mean, the big picture question is are we beyond superhero fatigue and into full on decline? Like, what is the state of, the genre that carried movie theaters through the 2010 superhero movies? Where do you see the state following the Marvels opening weekend?
Well, I'm reluctant to say it's indicative of any giant, people don't care about superheroes type thing for a couple of reasons. First of all, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse did $690 million. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did 850 something. It did about as well as the last one. And it did about as well, weirdly enough, in China as the last one, which is really unusual for any Hollywood movie in China for the last 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Whatever. I think what we're seeing is that the comic book superhero film, even from Marvel and DC, are far more execution dependent than they used to be. They're not getting arguably the free pass that they got from 2016 to 2019. Now that doesn't mean I'm thinking, that doesn't mean I'm saying Venom would have flopped in today's circumstances, but I do wonder to what extent its $80 million opening weekend and bonkers bananas, 200 million plus domestic total, sight unseen, would have still occurred in a world where these films weren't automatic events unto themselves.
Right.
Because obviously we've seen, this is something that's been something of an issue for comic book superhero movies for the last few years anyway. To use obvious examples, Joker making $1 billion didn't make Birds of Prey a hit, unfortunately. Venom did not make Morbius a hit, fortunately.
Right.
And obviously Fox pre-Disney, was already getting its ass kicked with X-Men Dark Phoenix.
Right. We did have our bombs, but then, I mean, you look at those salad days for the superhero movies. We used to look at something like the Justice League or Batman v Superman as bombs. And then those movies, when you look back, I mean, Justice League topped out, it made $655 million worldwide. Batman v Superman made what, 900 million? And those were the
873.
incredible. This Captain Marvel 2, the Marvels, is going to make less than Five Nights at Freddy's worldwide. I mean, did you see that coming? So, Scott, before we get back to superheroes, the Five Nights at Freddy's phenomenon, at what point were you feeling like, wow, this is real, this is coming, this is here? Because I mean,
a few weeks out,
okay,
when the tracking seemed to match with the online hype, which of course isn't always the case. And honestly, I would have been, a believer, pardon the expression, much earlier if they hadn't put it on Peacock. While obviously that did not really impact the box office in any real way.
Right.
I think we all correctly surmised that they were putting on Peacock because it was not a good movie.
Right.
Think Firestarter, for example. And I think in this case, it's not a good movie, all due respect, but it's also a movie that they knew wouldn't have legs. The fans would show up, and the film wasn't good enough to preach to the unconverted.
Right.
And it would flame out pretty quickly. So you weren't giving up that much in terms of whatever theoretical streaming value you were getting by putting that on Peacock. And, it's other people have said this, and I don't think they're wrong. As much as I don't care much for day and date releases on principle, I don't think there's anything wrong with Universal once a year doing that for a horror film around Halloween. A sort of we do this one time a year for a horror film, late October. It's sort of a fun thing we do for the holiday season.
Right. And it seems like between that and the Halloween sequels the previous years, even though those did not do well, the last two Halloweens, or did less than the previous ones,
still did very well by rational standards.
Right.
And by that I mean Halloween Kills actually dropped less from Halloween than did the first Halloween 2, and I think Halloween Resurrection from Halloween H2O.
Interesting.
And then it made about the same, give or take, percentage-wise, what a Zombies Halloween 2 did from Halloween. That remake.
Interesting.
So basically, because they're all fucking called Halloween.
They're all you have the famous theory. I mean, this is now studied in science labs all over the country. The Tomb Raider trap. Do you think Five Nights at Freddy's is a possible candidate someday for the Tomb Raider trap if they could actually make a quality sequel? Where let's assume
I don't
somehow
want to speak out of turn, but I think the creator being as involved as he was probably didn't help. In the same way that the sequels to Twilight and the sequels to 50 Shades of Grey, which had a lot more input from their authors, were not as good, respectively, as the first respective films. I mean, we're coming up on 15 years. I will defend Catherine Hardwicke's first Twilight as a genuinely good movie. The sequels, that's a more complicated conversation.
Right.
But to answer your question, yes and no. I don't necessarily expect a Five Nights at Freddy's Revenge to do as well as this film did. People were just curious the first time. A lot of people didn't like it. But, I mean, this would cost like $20 million. Even if they go crazy and spend $40 million on the sequel, and it only does, 150 worldwide, which would be about half of where it's going to end up. Oh, well.
Right.
150 worldwide would have been a nutty figure months ago for this film, let alone a sequel.
Right.
So, yes, I do think that's probably going to happen, where they're going to make a better, or at least more propulsive and crowd-pleasing film that will thus gross less, partially because people didn't like the first one. But I think as long as it's cheap enough, it's almost irrelevant.
Right. That's true. Yeah, the original the Tomb Raider movies, the problem was they also just cost so much money, and the
Yeah,
sequel
yeah. These
making
were all
must be
generally
lower.
expensive pictures. When you talk about, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Out of the Shadows, and Adam's Family Values, and the Suicide Squad. That was a
Right.
big one. That.
So back to the superhero issue, the Marvels issue. We want to throw something at you. A theory that we talked about coming out of this opening weekend was that the quality of this Marvels movie didn't really matter. This box office opening weekend felt almost predestined to be like months out. Our theory will throw at you, if the release dates had been switched and the Marvels opened last February and Quantumania opened this weekend, I feel like they would have done the same numbers. The Marvels would have made 100 million last February and Quantumania would have opened to 40 or 50s. That our theory is almost that there is just a decline in interest that has been continued. You saw it with the DC films. Look what Blue Beetle did over the summer. People are just getting less interested in the non-marquee characters. So what do you think of that? That there has just been, like you said, Spider-Man made huge money, Guardians made huge money, but in the major iconic characters, people are just getting sick of these movies, and it's happened throughout this year.
I think that's a very strong theory, and I that is something that's been thrown out, and I think part of it is because Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was so awful, and I say that as someone who really likes the
Right.
second Ant-Man quite a bit. I mean, I would argue that's the worst movie Marvel Studios has ever made.
Wow.
And I think if you want to talk about Tomb Raider trap, I mean, it's hard to, because Marvel is so weird, but it's like, did the Marvels pay for the sins of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Secret, to the extent that anyone watched it, Secret Invasion and all that
Yep.
stuff? So if that opens at the beginning of the year, A, does it open better? And B, does the overall narrative around Marvel, is that better because they're not dealing with this god-awful movie,
Right.
Right at the beginning of the year that, has rough special effects and, it's intended to set up the new villain.
Right.
And, of course, Jonathan Majors theoretically, I don't know how butterfly effect we're getting here, but theoretically, Jonathan Majors still would have been arrested for domestic violence in late March, early April, or whatever that was. So that still would have been, been an issue in future tense.
Right. Unless somehow the reviews from Quantumania caused that incident. I mean, we don't know. You're right.
Yeah.
Once you change any, you step on a worm in the past, you could start World War III in the future. Who knows?
Well, we know
again,
because this is a multiverse we're talking about.
Right.
Multiverses is so popular nowadays. So
I will swear that absent the COVID pandemic and choices that were made by Warner Brothers during the COVID pandemic, that DC would still be riding high. I genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Blue Beetle is really a movie, and I have not seen that, but I've heard, like the Marvels, it's pretty fun. But that is a movie that really paid for the sins of the previous years of DC.
Yes, it's if that movie had come out 2017, 2018 even, I don't think it would have been a super duper smash, but it would have been a solid moneymaker.
Right.
And that's what pisses me off. And I know I talk a lot about this a lot, which is that, intentional or not, DC, and more so I would say Marvel, basically waited until almost the end of the superhero boom to genuinely diversify their lineup. For the vast majority of the so-called Infinity Saga, they kept saying, don't worry, guys, we're going to get diverse soon. We're going to have movies starring women and minorities soon. Just you wait. And what do we get? We got two very good, very successful movies that came out as basically penultimate episodes before the finale.
Right. I got to ask you, what has happened to any continuation of Shang-Chi? Because, I mean, we kind of look at everything post-Endgame as all the Marvel movies failed, aside from the Spider-Mans and the iconic characters, the Thor sequels. But Shang-Chi was a 2021 still COVID-y times, but open to $90 million was a full-on hit. And I listen, we're not plugged in on the scene in Hollywood the way you are, of course, Scott, but I have not heard any peeps about just straight out doing a sequel to that movie.
Well, I'm sure, as you know, that Destin Daniel, is it Destin Daniel or Daniel Destin? I can never remember.
I
The
think it's
lovely
Dustin
director who
first.
made, Destin Daniel Cretton, the guy that made the awesome short term 12 and the very good Just Mercy. He is no longer directing Avengers King Dynasty. He
Okay.
left. That was announced today.
Wow.
But they
Is
swear
that movie a thing anymore?
Well, that's a good question. I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
They swear that he is still developing Wonder Man for Disney Plus, a television show, and he is still working on. Well, he's still shooting that. And that was a strike interruption, and he's still developing a Shang-Chi sequel.
Okay.
I'm disappointed because I think Shang-Chi is, give or take, Guardians 3, far and away the best post-Endgame Marvel thing we've gotten, be it television, movies, or whatever. And I think it's one of their best standalone solo movies, period.
Right.
I thought it was freaking terrific. And judging by the reviews and the word of mouth and the legs, it legged out to 235 from a 94 million 4-day opening during a time when even Marvel movies weren't that leggy.
Right, right. It made Labor Day a weekend that counts now. It made a holiday. How many movies could say
it was the
made
biggest
a holiday?
grossing Labor Day release ever in one weekend?
Yeah,
by far.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's because it's so standalone, because it's not necessarily considered part of the big multiverse saga or whatever, it does tend to not be included in the conversation. That being said, I think, if you want to break it down, just movies, the TV shows in a second.
Yeah.
Movies, okay.
Put those aside.
2021, sure. Black Widow was compromised by being available for $30 on Disney Plus. It did $380 worldwide, did about 130 million worth of Disney Plus figures, and we can try to pretend what would have been ticket prices, yada yada yada. But let's be nice and say that release was compromised. I don't think the movie ever would have done anywhere near $1 billion, but 600 seemed reasonable.
Yep.
Same thing with Wonder Woman 84. It was never going to do $1 billion, but 650, 750 seemed reasonable. Was it as good as the first one? No. Was it as crowd pleasing as the first one? No. But it wasn't going to it wasn't going to pull an Alice for the Looking Glass.
Right.
But partially because the opening weekend probably would have been freaking huge. So it would have been, mitigated some of the bleeding. But anyway, so you have, and Shang-Chi's a giant hit. Elementals is their first unmitigated flop. Now, okay, the Incredible Hulk flopped in June of 2008, but that never counts for whatever reason. And what happened in 2022? Here's what's weird. In 2022, all 3 Marvel releases, the Disney ones, did spectacular. But they weren't playing in China, they weren't playing in Russia, which skewed the grosses, so it made it look like they were less successful than they actually were.
Because that was what? Black Panther 2.
Black Panther Wakanda Forever made $860 million, including $450 domestic for the 180 opening, so it lagged.
Thor 2, Thor 3.
Another 125 to 150 from China and Russia, which wouldn't have been out of the question in pre-COVID times, and that's an over-under $1 billion picture. Thor: Love and Thunder earns 760 worldwide, give or take. Again, without give that 160 million in China and Russia, and you have a $900 million picture. And if you do like-for-like comparisons, it made more money in the markets in which it played, not adjusted for inflation, than Thor Ragnarok.
Wow.
So in like-for-like, it was more successful than its predecessor. We know what happens when Part 4's bomb. Batman and Robin.
Right.
But, and then, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which for some ridiculous reason, too many pundits who had no idea what the hell they were talking about thought it was going to be like a glorified, straight up sequel to Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home. No Way Home.
Yeah.
It made $960 million without China, without Russia. It is still the 3rd biggest Marvel movie without Spider-Man or Iron Man, period.
Right. And has to be the biggest sequel jump of any of these Marvel movies from 1 to 2. I mean, that is a gigantic leap.
From 1 to 2, yes.
Yeah.
I'm going off memory, but I'm pretty sure Captain America Winter Soldier to Captain America Civil War, which to be fair, that was, Avengers 2.5, yada, yada, yada.
Well, and I think that's where these are similar, because the Doctor Strange sequel was a sequel that encompassed a lot of strands that were going on in the Marvel
Yes.
universe.
And
Can I ask a quick question? Because I think the
No.
other headline. Okay, I'll stop talking. The other headline that has come out over the Marvels is Gen Z doesn't care about Marvel. Have you seen these headlines with 19% of people between 18 and 24 went to see the Marvels compared to in their heyday? Now, do you think, Scott, this is just an outlier because of this movie, or is this a warning of things to come?
I think it's a warning of things to come in the sense that they need to do work. And again, these are not insurmountable problems.
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily super optimistic that Fantastic Four, the fourth version of that, and X-Men and Blade are going to save the MCU the way a lot of other people are, if for no other reason than A, we've seen all those properties before, and B, if the core idea of the MCU is no longer an event unto itself, and it's quite possible we're there already, then the mere notion of, oh, another X-Men, or oh, another Blade, or oh, another Fantastic Four is far, far, far less appealing to general audiences than it would have been, in the 2010s.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
What that means is that A, they aren't automatically going to save Marvel's ass, but B, Feige and friends need to do the work to make films that are appealing and exciting and worth anticipating, even outside their connection to the MCU.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think that's such a great point because when you look at something like Barbie, right? Barbie is a female-led movie with tons of diversity in it. And it was a huge, huge hit, right? And the movie was something people liked. It was a good movie according to the public. So if Marvel can do that, then they can also have big movies. It's not out of their grasp. It's just like you said, the quality has been so poor. And yes, the Marvels, I've heard people have enjoyed it, but it did get a B. And that
Yeah,
is
which
Eternals
Kind
level.
of shocks me because it's
But those are the hardcores, though. Those were the
Yeah,
hardcores who went and saw it. So, I mean, because we can see the hardcores that are following Marvel everywhere now are $46 million worth of people. That is way different than what it was during 2019 when the first one came out. So it's not out of the grasp to make this sort of movie. It's just, can they? And that's the question.
And I think as far as the inclusivity diversity argument, there's 2 points to be made. First of all, the people online that are constantly making YouTube videos and trolling social media networks, it's a self-propelling, economically driven grift. I mean, you know that. I mean, it's an economy unto itself. They will never stop because it's how they make money.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And because we were morons in 2015, 2016, 2017 and took these idiots seriously. And you had the media, not me, hopefully not you, but
Definitely not us.
No.
Not us.
We're just getting
we
onto
don't have to
YouTube
turn,
Right.
we don't have to pretend that the men bitching about woman-only Wonder Woman screenings have a point.
Right.
We don't have to pretend that the racist and sexist trolls whining about Ghostbusters ruining their childhood deserve a seat at the debate table.
And when you look at the Marvels bombing this weekend, you hate to see that then being able to be used as evidence there, when again, this movie would have bombed if it was Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, Mr. Marvel, Senor Marvel, Joe Marvel. This movie was going to bomb this weekend because people
and that's the
need
tragedy,
a break.
is that the film that again, what Marvel waited so long to make these kind of films, that the mere idea of a comic book superhero movie set in the MCU is no longer an event unto himself. So the film ran into the problem that's been, frankly, plaguing inclusive entertainments for the last decade or so, but specifically in the last several years, which is that inclusivity and diversity is an added value element. Makes movies better, provides positive social change, yada, yada, yada. It also is an added value element for films that people already want to see.
Right.
But audiences will not show up for a film that they otherwise don't want to see just because it contains representation for one demographic or another.
Right.
Yeah,
People
I
want
mean,
to see a movie because they want to see a movie. And
Well, yeah.
and nothing's going to keep them away in that way, and
Exactly.
nothing's going to make them see something
And that's why I always
necessarily
get pissed
don't wanna
about,
see.
China's racist because of First of all, Black Panther made about as much in China, more in China than like Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 and 3.
Right.
You know, it made about what was par for the course, you know, rounding error of what superhero movies were doing in China at that point.
Well, and you look at the Fast and Furious franchise and La Familia.
Coco was a smash in China.
Yeah, those
where Soul made money was China.
Yeah, those movies are big and they are very diverse. And it's like the reason people didn't see Fast X was they didn't all of a sudden become racist and sexist. Fast X isn't at the level of quality that the previous films are. It's just
More
true.
Importantly,
so
I think Fast X is by default the best one since Furious 7, but the ones since Furious 7 haven't been particularly good.
Yes, I mean the Fast series has almost fallen into a bit of a Tomb Raider trap at this point, where the sequels people didn't.
And I don't want to oversell Fast X. It's mostly because I thought Jason Momoa was a hoot. But
you mentioned Jason Momoa. He's hosting Saturday Night Live this weekend. You know, the actors are promoting again. Aquaman 2. I feel like this has come up almost every episode we've had you on in the last year, and we've all been, and especially you have been like, it's going to be fine. It's James Wan. It's still this character that people loved the first time. The star is back. The first one made $1 billion. And, you know, it seems like your take had been, it's going to make less, but 70% of the first one still 700 million, you know, around that. Coming off of this Marvel's movie and seeing just how bad The Flash, Shazam 2, and Blue Beetle did. And the fact that James Gunn seems to be just really wanting to move on and get to his stuff. Could this Aquaman 2 flat out bomb at this point? I mean, is this a movie that could open to Marvel's numbers? Could this open to 50 domestic, or do you still feel James Wan is there?
Sorry.
No, go for it.
I think for what it's worth, the first Aquaman only opened to 72 million. It just had legs, incredible, even for Christmas legs. It was the leggiest live action comic book superhero movie since Tim Burton's Batman. You know, does this weekend give me pause? Yes, it does, of course. That being said, I think the people that liked Aquaman didn't necessarily like it because it was a comic book superhero movie.
Right.
And I think Warner Brothers knows that, you know, they're certainly not going to sell it as the next chapter in the now defunct DC universe.
Right.
They're going to sell it as it's another Aquaman movie. You liked the last one. Everyone's back.
They should almost sell it as, hey, this is sort of like Avatar, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Sell it as a fantasy water movie.
They're selling it like the year-end. I'm hoping they're going to sell it as this is this year's year-end fantasy spectacular.
Right.
And there are very, very few examples of the last 25 years of those films, you know, underperforming or bombing. I mean, even the freaking Hobbit prequels did $2.9 billion, opening around the same time.
That's the key. He's not a superhero. He's a Hobbit. He's an Avatar guy. Like he is fan. He is a fan. He's a Jedi. Maybe not a Jedi right now, but yeah. That's you nailed it. They got to sell it as this is fantasy. This is not superhero.
And again, I don't know if it's any good. I do think it's interesting that like half the online discourse about the film being in trouble is about A, whether it's part of the DC universe or not, and B, which Batman, if any, makes a cameo, which in terms of the movie, who gives a shit?
I mean,
the general audiences will not give two craps if a Batman shows up in this.
Will it be George?
Most audiences won't give two craps either way, whether Amber Heard is in it.
Right.
That's so true. Amber Heard is not a household name other than to people online or, no offense, older housewives who watch E.T. and Access Hollywood. Do you think that the Batman that shows up in Aquaman 2 is George Clooney's head on Michael Keaton's body, which is now the canon?
If Zaslav got his
Batman.
way, I'm sure it's the reanimated corpse of Adam West.
Yes.
I mean,
it didn't work going for the Gen Xers of Batman 89.
Let me double down to make that even scummier. The reanimated corpse of Adam West, voiced by the late Kevin Conroy.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, you got it. That's such fanboy service. It's exactly what they don't want.
And before we leave the superheroes, next year, the superhero lineup is basically the MCU has Deadpool 3, which
is an unconventional MCU movie.
And yeah, I mean, it is interesting that Deadpool 3 is the MCU movie next year, and it's the first time we've had a Disney Deadpool. So it is this introduction of this Fox property, and then a bunch of these Sony Spider-Man villain movies.
Do they even count?
I mean,
they can't. They can't.
The Madam Web trailer
Venom 3,
dropped.
sure.
Venom 3 should be big, but Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web are such unknowns. And Clayton and I are going to talk about the Madam Web trailer in our after show, but that dropped today, and man, that one could be a Morbius. That feels like a Morbius situation.
Well, it looks less boring than Morbius. How about that?
It does. Kraven looks like a Morbius.
One of the more less coherent trailers I've seen for a major release of that nature in a while.
Yeah.
Yes. I was very confused about
I had to watch it 3 times to get basic what the hell is going on here.
Yes.
Oh, this is an early 2000s butterfly effect type sci-fi. They've got special powers that can, change the future, but at what cost, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And Pat, isn't also Joker 2 coming out next year?
Another very unconventional DC movie.
Yeah.
So you're getting basically a year-long break from the course, which if we weren't in the middle of a fucking strike would be wonderful. Then we'd have a full slate of other movies just for audiences to put their money where their mouth is.
Well, I mean, just looking ahead to next year in general, because of the 6-month delay in production, next year feels like it's 2021 all over again. I mean, next year feels like we're going to have a weekend where we're hoping, hey, maybe In the Heights is going to be a huge movie.
God.
So, yeah, I mean, could you just talk to your big picture thought to next year? Is it going to be that bad? Are we back to 2021 where it's got Godzilla v Kong, save us, please save us?
I think it might be worse. Here's why. First of all, I'm looking at the summer calendar, and there's very little in there that I really, really want to see and I'm excited about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like the first Twister, but I'm not chomping at the bit for a legacy sequel to Twister.
Well, there's more. There's Twisters.
Yes.
So there will be more than one
$.
Twister. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm kind of encouraged that they moved the Fall Guy to May to sort of the summer kickoff movie. It's the first time since 2006 that a Marvel movie has not been the first one out of the gate.
Wow.
Although there's still time for Sony to move Kraven to late April and have that be the summer kickoff movie, which would be the perfect way to celebrate the 50th anniversary of X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yes.
And to further commemorate, they will leak a DVD quality print online a month before release.
Oh, yes. With unfinished FX. I think we really want to see that.
Well, if they weren't that unfinished, if you saw the final version.
That is the only...
You're right. It wasn't that much of a upgrade.
That is the only time I've ever seen that movie. I saw the leaked version with a girlfriend at the time, and it was the best. It was the best part of that relationship. Anyway,
that's saying something.
It really is.
But now they're not the one, because if you survive X-Men Origins Wolverine, then she's a keeper.
Yeah. That's the test. That's the door test.
And you'll pardon me. I'm looking at the seller. I mean, one reason I think it's gonna be worse is A, we have fewer titles, and B, we don't have the Marvel movies coming to save our ass here and there.
Right.
We don't have. We don't have a No Time to, or even like a No Time to Die, or a Shang-Chi, or again, I guess maybe Deadpool, maybe Joker, maybe, but there's a lot less surefire hits in especially summer 2024.
Right.
Which just looks, it's like, oh boy, a Quiet Place spinoff, neat. A Garfield movie, okay. A Furiosa prequel? I mean, I don't think anyone offline has any interest whatsoever in that.
Yeah, I mean,
look, I love George Miller. He certainly has the benefit of the doubt, yada, yada, yada. But I know of no one coming out of Mad Max Fury Road thinking, you know what I really want to see? I want to see flashbacks to when they were sex slaves.
Yeah, that is a tough sell. They're going to have to not use what you just said as the log line for sure.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to really, although, you know what? Maybe nowadays that's what people want to see. But a big part of this past year, the box office has been the surprise factor of we didn't see months out Barbie coming. We didn't see Sound of Freedom coming. We didn't see Five Nights at Freddy's coming. We didn't see Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, the movie coming. And I think you don't want to bank on surprises, but that is going to have to be what saves 2024 is a bunch of giant movies that we didn't either were underestimating or currently don't exist, like a Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour. Maybe she pulls 30 new awesome songs out of her hat and then puts another movie out. Who knows?
Well, that's why,
tour shot in IMAX cameras.
Yes.
I mean, listen, who knows? I mean, the thing about the Marvels that were coming out next year were that those weren't surefires because you had Thunderbolts and then you had the Captain America without actual Captain America, right? So neither of those were slam doinks. So that's the thing, is that even if they would have stayed in their 2024 dates, I don't know if that would have saved the box office the way Marvel used to. I just don't think. I think this was a problem with Marvel scheduling, that other than Deadpool 3, they didn't have any surefire sequels.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, and for the record, I agree with you. I'm just adding a yes and. One reason I'm so grim about this year's schedule is, even if Captain America 4 and Thunderbolts had come out and only done a Turtles numbers, that would have been bad. But that's 800 million worldwide that the theaters aren't going to see next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, maybe Inside Out 2 will do anywhere near what Inside Out 1 does, but I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's grim.
What's your take on Inside Out 2? Do you think kids would be into ennui?
I think they would. I think that drives a lot of the Wattpad generation. In fact, they may be banking on that, to be honest.
Yeah. I think, Clayton, we've had this out before. I think Inside Out is just that kind of property for kids where you put out that second movie. It's not for you, Clayton, but that movie's going to make $1 billion.
Well, here's the thing.
For Bing Bong was I know Bing Bong may have gone night in the first one, but it's going to be like Bing Bong's cousin will be in it. Like,
you got to bring Bing Bong back. Because they moved Elio out of next year because they're like, okay, we can't have this. We need a sequel. We need a legacy sequel, not a legacy, but we need a sequel to one of our big hits. And Pat, I think Inside Out 2 is gonna be huge, but I think it's a sign of creative bankruptcy that is inevitably gonna lead to Pixar still going down the drain. But they just have their fingers there holding themselves up tenuously, because the Ilios don't then become the Inside Outs, and the Lucas don't become the Ratatouilles, and they don't become the Incredibles. That's the problem, is that you're not seeing them create anything that is going to be able to be successfully sequelized. So this is just stopgaps.
Yeah. I mean, the only caveat I'd say to that is I think Elio would have done very well had it opened in March, just because I think a big part of Elemental was sort of retraining audiences to see Pixar movies in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
A good one that wasn't. I mean, I didn't hate Lightyear, but it's sort of what you see is what you get kind of thing. Again, I think it bombed for the same reason as Solo: A Star Wars Story did. Nobody asked for this. But I think Elio had a great trailer that had a very simple, appealing hook. And obviously it's not coming out till a year and a half from then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't think you could follow Elemental.
I think overall, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't follow Elemental with Elio.
Momentum, not. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. Just again, I think the hope was that Elemental was so leggy and eventually beloved that the next one out of the gate benefits from that. But I don't know. We'll never know because they moved it a year and a half.
Pat, we can't hear you.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh,
I was just
no.
telling Pat we couldn't hear him.
Got
Oh,
him.
okay.
So,
Sorry.
no, I agree. It basically elementals wash that bad taste out of everyone's mouth that we got from Lightyear. So yeah, next year is looking light, but I'll tell you what, Scott, this coming weekend, Friday, November, what is it, 17th? This is a jam-packed weekend at the box office. You know, as light as next year looks, the next couple of weeks, just this year, have got a lot of big movies coming out. So, you know, the big one that had been kind of a question mark for a while is this Hunger Games reboot. Lionsgate has Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and it's starring Rachel Zegler from West Side Story. And this is one of those that has done kind of reverse the Marvels, where a few months ago, I feel like everyone had left this movie for dead, had said a Lionsgate is just rebooting it so they don't lose the rights to the IP, or they need to show that they have Hunger Games. So when they try and sell the company, some other company wants to keep making Hunger Games movies. And now I'm hearing some good buzz on this. You know, the reviews haven't been out of this world, but there just seems to be some kind of excitement. So starting with this movie, where do you got your finger in the wind when it comes to the Hunger Games reboot? Is the buzz real? Are people excited, or is it
I am
just
genuinely surprised by the generally mixed. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregation site, but
Mhm.
I really liked it. And
Okay?
I was, walking out of the screenings. Most people I talked to thought it was at least, hey, that was better than I expected.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I am a little surprised by the turning consensus, which whatever.
Right.
That being said, what Lionsgate has done, and this is probably one of the smartest things that any major studio has done in terms of franchises, is that they have been very adamant that this is one movie based on
Wow.
one book. And if people like it and they show up, maybe you'll get another one. But this isn't the
Wow.
start of a 5-part prequel franchise. This isn't
Mhm.
the start of a trilogy. And we've already got the next 2 release dates picked. This is
Right.
one movie.
That
And
is so
I
smart.
and from what I gather, and they spent about 100 million on it, give or take. And I think they will be very happy if they get Divergent numbers. And they
Okay.
will be right,
Yes.
which is over under 300 million worldwide.
Okay. And
And over under 140 domestic.
is this a movie that just takes place in this universe, but isn't a remake of the Jennifer Lawrence Katniss
Oh, not at
story?
all.
Not at all.
I mean, it's
Okay.
very different.
Got it.
And that's not a slight on the previous pictures. For one thing, Rachel Ziegler's, I think Lucy Gray is her name, is a very different person.
Okay.
Without getting to better or worse, because who cares? But I mean, she's not. If you remember this, I mean, this was weird because by this time, Twilight was also be distributed by Lionsgate by the end. But the first Hunger Games was basically sold as the anti-Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
In that,
Mhm.
everyone that was complaining about Bella Swan being this passive, unfeminist character that only cares about romance, blah blah blah. I think, the antidote to that is Katniss Everdeen, this badass, weapon wielding, death dealing ass kicker who doesn't care about love and is taking down a corrupt empire. And of
Right. Right.
course, if you've seen the movies, that's the narrative that's in the movies, where she is turned into this unwilling propaganda figure / feminist action hero for what turns out to be very self-serving purposes. And
Mhm.
B, that film had a love triangle.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Twilight didn't have a love triangle. That was entirely fabricated by marketing and the fan base. If you read the books, if you watch the movies, she never had any interest in Jacob whatsoever.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But you had to have
That was
those
all
teams.
fabricated.
We sold so many Team Jacob shirts
So
back
many
in those
shirts.
days.
Yes.
So many. We
So
all had them.
many.
We all
Those
had
in
a
my
Team Jacob shirt.
they're in the closet with my vote for Pedro shirt.
Yeah.
Now, you used Divergent as a great comp. 2014, 54 million opening, right? So that's where people are seeing this, and if that comes to pass, that's pretty great. And I would say when you're talking critics, when you're talking Rotten Tomatoes, I think again, we're talking about the sea change when it comes to the box office and what is big and what is going to be a hit. I think there's a lot of critics that are millennials, maybe elder millennials, who look at Hunger Games as sort of a joke, as an IP and as a franchise. So they are not caught up with what younger people actually want to see. And I think that's the thing, is that they don't have the interest in this that a younger generation does. And so there's a blind spot there. And that's why you're getting
Well,
critics being like, I don't get this, or I don't like this.
that would be nice, because it would be nice if this new Hunger Games film was a success because of kids and not people my age on a nostalgia trip. Because after all, I mean, the Hunger Games was, and so far remains, the last new to cinema live action successful theatrical franchise that pulled top tier blockbuster numbers. I mean, there have been standalone films since then. Obviously, Barbie, yada yada yada. We'll probably get a Barbie sequel, yada yada yada. But since the Hunger Games ended in 2015, there has not been another new to cinema live action franchise that spawned multiple installments that pulled, I think, even over 600 million worldwide apiece. And that just, it's I don't want to say I called it, but I did write that essay right before the last one came out. Are we ever going to see another one of these?
He called it. You don't say it, but we'll say it. He called it.
Well, I was writing essays in like 2011, 2012, saying I was excited for the Hunger Games because it was a new property for today's kids.
Yeah. So
now, I mean, Five Nights at Freddy's is one of the worst movies of the year, but I'm thrilled it was a hit because my kids liked it.
Yeah.
Yes. That's the very young generation. Now, we got an email from one of B.O. Boy, Austin, old school, OG, actually got into box office because of you, Scott. You created this man, and he is a very smart gentleman. And he said that Hunger Games is exactly his generation. He was in middle school, high school, right when the films hit their peak. And there's a certain generational nostalgia for this franchise in his demographic. So he is saying that he thinks his generation is going to come out in droves for this film and surprise some people.
I mean, I'm looking at Austin's prediction here. He wrote us the theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. He's predicting 68. I mean, is there a world? Yeah, is there a world? And maybe it is something to, we've seen this year. People want to go to the movies, and young people do want to go to the movies. They want events, and they all decided, young people, that the Marvels was not the event. But maybe they're saving it up for this weekend. Like there is something to the Hunger Games could benefit from, all right, tepid reaction last weekend because we're saving it all to go out this weekend. We'll give our predictions at the end of this episode when we do our top fives. But yeah, Scott, what do you see as the ceiling for this movie? Could it hit 60, 70 million?
Sure. I mean, I think that's overly optimistic just because I'm a cynical, cranky bastard. But that being said, I mean, that's certainly within the realm of possibility. I'd be more optimistic if the overall general critical consensus was better.
Right.
Because I think, we have a situation like Bad Boys for Life, which was, an ages, 15 years in development sequel that everyone's like, oh, this is such a cheap cash and blah, blah. And then we all saw it, was like, holy shit, this movie's great.
Oh,
and the film opened much better than it projected because of the positive reviews and the positive word of mouth in those last few days leading up to opening weekend.
Yep.
That was such a great weekend when that kept going up and up and up. Me and Pat texting each other, excited, elated at that moving up the charts. It's possible that this does the same.
The caveat, there are caveats. It's the Hunger Games. It's not quite a crowd pleaser in the conventional sense.
Okay.
It's depressing.
Long. It's over 2.5 hours. And
that's
don't begrudge that because whatever, but I think there is a 140, 135 minute movie of this that exists, but whatever.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's, and I do think, and I'm getting way in the weeds here. I mean, the film's about a ridiculously attractive woman who hits it off with a very handsome but problematic dude, and can they make it work? Can she fix him? Is he beyond saving? I mean, there's a lot of, that's fanfic. That's a dire genre of fanfic right there.
Right.
Mhm.
It's listen,
I
it's
mean,
Gone with the Wind. It's Gone with the Wind.
It's
You know?
Rilo the movie.
Yep. So
Um,
you mentioned Rachel Zegler, the star of this movie. You know, The Hunger Games made Jennifer Lawrence into a megastar. You know, and then she became a box office star outside of that with the David O. Russell movies that she headlined. But that one made her a giant worldwide star. Obviously, star making these days is harder than ever. You've seen this film. This box office could do 50, 60, 70 million perhaps this weekend. Is this a potential star making performance for Rachel Zegler? Are you making a face there? Elaborate, Scott.
well, this isn't 2012 anymore.
Mm,
And I that's the big thing, is that, it's even if everything goes right for this film, this doesn't magically mean that casting Rachel Zegler in a mid-budget studio legal thriller will get people in seats.
right.
And you can debate to what extent Lawrence was even able to pull that.
Right.
I mean, it's weird because like Red Sparrow was a flop, but it made 170 million despite being a very long and incredibly violent and nudity-filled grimdark spy drama.
She
That
got
was cost
60
70 million.
She got $60 million domestic about a lady selling a mop. So
Yes.
I would say she was a legit star.
Yeah. And that sort of goes to the whole problem with one of the problems with modern stardom, which is that the budgets just got too big.
Right.
If Top Gun cost 150 million back in 1986, we'd probably be in a very different conversation.
Right.
But she is terrific in this picture.
Okay.
I think she's fine in West Side Story. I think she's fine in Shazam, but those are not particularly complex roles.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I like West Side Story. Spielberg's a god, yada, yada, yada. But she is, by virtue of the material, a relatively straightforward, simple, virginal love interest.
Right. She's the fourth most interesting
person.
person.
Yeah, and she's basically the same thing in Shazam's Fury of the Gods.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, that's the role. She's not the star of that, yada, yada, yada. This is really the first time we've seen her give what I would consider a genuine, honest to goodness movie star performance.
Mm-hmm.
And she is terrific.
All right.
Wow.
And if this needs to be said, again, the online grifting is just that. It's online grifting. The real world has no strong opinions about Rachel Zegler because they probably don't even know who she is.
Yes.
And they don't have an opinion on Snow White genuinely until the movie comes out.
That's the best one. Because I mean, on what earth is Snow White held up as some kind of, macho masterpiece?
Right.
I mean,
see somebody
almost get the blue collar manly men Ghostbusters being offended, or boo hoo, there's women in my Star Wars or whatever. But fucking Snow White.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. She's not remaking Rocky.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this weekend you got the Hunger Games movie.
Well, speaking of trolls, I mean, not online trolls, but animated trolls band together. The trolls are banding together this weekend.
Excellent segue.
Thank you. And again, this is sort of a situation that Paw Patrol had, where like the first one was big. We know that. Second one came out, one of the first PVOD movies during COVID that came out on PVOD.
The first Paw Patrol.
I'm sorry. The Trolls. The second Trolls came out on PVOD.
Yes.
And that was the first. I mean, that was before PVOD was even a term, right?
Yes.
And so that one you can't really judge what the box office was. This one, the third movie in a question mark popular franchise, because we don't know, is this going to have similar numbers to something like the first Trolls, or is this going to be a Smurfs 2 situation?
It's going to be a Smurfs 2 situation, but they've accounted for that in the budget.
Okay.
The movie cost around under $95 million, give or take. It's already made 67 overseas. It's not going to do as well as the first one, which did 346 million worldwide. It's only like 370 million worldwide, 150 domestic in late 2016. But frankly, I think Universal knew that was going to happen with the second one, which is one reason why they sent it to PVOD, among lots of other variables, obviously. But I think that did factor the decision, that it was almost certain to be an animated sequel that, like Lego Movie 2, like Angry Birds 2, there was a third one Secret Life of Pets 2.
Yep.
Even if the previous one was a well-liked success, people aren't nostalgic for those particular characters.
Right.
They're not marquee characters in the way that Woody and Buzz or Anna and Elsa or Hiccup and Toothless are.
Right. And, the first movie, the first Trolls, you had the Justin Timberlake song, Can't Stop the Feeling, gigantic song that definitely affected the box office. Justin Timberlake, not as popular.
Boy, is he glad he doesn't have to promote this movie. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the strike is over.
Not for him, it's not.
No, nobody told him.
No, so
his people did not tell him.
He's going to be pretending to be one of those people like the Japanese soldiers that were on an island that didn't realize war was over.
He doesn't know that the SAG strike is over, so he doesn't have to answer Britney questions. Yeah.
He's on a silent retreat like Jared Leto was at the beginning of the COVID pandemic.
Right.
Yeah. So, you're right. He's not quite as fuzzy-wuzzy as he was 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, listen, I think you've nailed it. This movie is not going to make as much as the first one. I wonder if the PVOD nature of the second one hurts this, or people forget. There's something to tarnishing the brand a little bit, where people now see this as, oh yeah, that's TV Trolls. Why is this in a movie theater?
That is one reason why MGM was so adamant about not letting No Time to Die go out on VOD or streaming or whatever. Because they were offered ungodly amounts of money, but they, to their credit, stuck firm and said, "No, this is a theatrical franchise. If you do this once, then it's over." Now, again, this is Trolls, so it's even if it does, opens to 25 million and legs out to 75, because DreamWorks movies are always very leggy. And then does another, again, it'll be a hit. It'll be a solid moneymaker, and it'll do very well in post theatrical. VOD, VOD, DVD. It'll do well on Peacock, whatever that's worth. And then it'll pop up on Netflix and be their most watched movie for a week or two. And everyone will be happy.
Yeah.
And this is a jukebox musical, which we've seen movies like Sing and Sing 2 do really well with that sort of format for kids. So, even though the actors in it are a little bit stale, I mean, Anna Kendrick and Justin Timberlake being your two leads in 2023 means a lot less than it did in 2016. But, and I think there's an NSYNC song that might have, and I don't know how well it's doing pop culture wise, but that was a thing about this. But still, I do think, again, Scott, what you're saying is that this is not going to reach the heights, but this is you said something that is very indicative of a studio that knows what they're doing, and that Universal said, okay, we can't shell out as much money to get less return, right? And so I think that is a lesson that can be learned by all of these studios, Marvel especially. It's like, yes, if you look at a $46 million opening for the Marvels, maybe your next movie, your Blade movie, it doesn't have that big of a you don't have $200 million, riding on this thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, you got to remember, during the Phase 2 golden era, the Marvel movies generally cost around 170.
Right.
Yeah, there's inflation and even more inflation over the last couple of years, and COVID protocols and all of that jazz. But, I think there's a case to be made that, except for like Avengers 5, whatever that's going to be, you cap these puppies at 200 million come hell or high water.
Yeah. Look to the Trolls. Learn a lesson from Trolls. Get the band back together and keep those budgets manageable for the sequels.
I do think you're right. That's interesting how this theatrical franchise, where the second film was basically a home video release for all intents and purposes, will now perform as a theatrical again. And that was my fear back in December 2020 when they threw HBO, or when they announced that Wonder Woman 84 was going to Max. Like, you've just killed it as a theatrical franchise.
Yep.
And even more so, I do think that, I mean, Trolls has another issue, which is that they have a series that is also available for free on streaming. So there is a dilution there. I mean, I think you see that
Normally,
with
I'd agree with you, but DreamWorks, for whatever reason, has been putting out cartoon episodics of basically all of their movies for the last decade. And so far, it doesn't seem to be negatively impacting the movies.
Right.
I
Like
mean,
the How
there's
to Train Your
there's
Dragon
yeah, there's
movies.
a
And
ton
they
of How
have,
to Train in
yeah,
continuity.
yeah.
The villain from part 2 who survives part 2 dies in the TV show.
Wow. So that's the MCU that worked in terms of
Yeah.
mixing TV and movies, is the How to Train
Because
Your
they
Dragon
differentiate
story.
between, okay, the big fuckers are the ones you see in theaters. Everything else is
Yes.
if you want.
Yes.
And I think that's what the TV shows are too. It's just the Disney marketing machine kind of forced them to say, "Oh, you have to watch these Disney Plus shows to see what's going on," even though that's not the case at all.
Right. Right.
I mean, I always joke that my favorite scene in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is when he goes to meet Wanda and he says something to the effect of, "Shut up, Wanda. I didn't have time to watch your stupid television show."
Yeah. That.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Doctor Strange movie, I think, is going to be looked at as, it was a giant hit, but it definitely was something that I think had a lot of effect on the psyche of the audience in terms of,
Because they
you
weren't
know,
used to seeing real movies.
right. Right. So this weekend we got Trolls, and I think we're on the same page. It'll do fine. The rats need their cheese. There hasn't been a
Yes.
big kids movie. The Taylor Swift movie has to slow down, so the singing kids in the theaters are going to want to sing to something else, so they'll sing to NSYNC, I guess. But another movie coming out this weekend, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. And listen, I'm a horror fan. Clayton is a horror fan. We love the original trailer for this in the Grindhouse movie that came out almost 20 years ago.
2007.
This, to me,
Yeah.
this feels like a movie no one asked for in a real way. And obviously it's a horror movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's low budget. The seal, it doesn't have to do that well to do well. But I get that it's called Thanksgiving, so you open it a week before Thanksgiving, but this does feel a little strange opening right now, this crowded weekend. We just had our glut of October Halloween movies. So, Scott, do you feel like this is going to do above average horror, below average horror? I kind of feel like it might do below average horror.
I think they're expecting an over under 10 million.
Uh-huh.
And that, it might overperform because holy shit, the reviews are spectacular. I don't know if you've checked. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard enough for me to convince my wife to see Oscar-y movies with me this season, let alone when Thanksgiving, which is totally her shit, is getting better reviews than most of the Oscar bait.
Right. That is interesting. And Eli Roth is obviously, he's not the cause celebre that he may have been in the Hostel days, but
yeah,
he definitely is he's a good filmmaker. So him making a good movie makes sense. I'm just so curious about who wants this, but yeah, it's horror. So
It's
Clayton,
horror, Pat.
it's horror.
Yeah,
You're right.
I'm aghast at you. We've had so many conversations with Brett from the wonderful New Flesh podcast, hashtag horror lifestyle, new father. So I feel like, this movie is instead of a 70s homage, it's been updated to a 90s homage. And you can tell from the poster, it has a very Scream-esque poster that was released.
Uh-huh.
And I think that you saying this not being released in horror season is a mistake. It's called Thanksgiving. If they would have released it any other time than Thanksgiving, they would have gotten the shit kicked out of them. So this is the perfect time to release this film if they were going to. Your question of who wants this, kids want horror. They want to see people get slashed. We've seen this. The other thing is there is a very famous viral star in this film. I'm going to look up her name, but she got famous from TikTok dancing. Do you know what I'm talking about here, Scott?
Addison Rae?
Yes, Addison Rae, who has a butt ton of followers on social media. So she will be promoting the heck out of this movie now, especially because she can. And so I think that this is going to surprise you. When you say lower tier, are you saying this is going to do invitation, Pat? Because
Well,
I don't
that's
think it's going to go that low.
that's what I'm thinking. Does this make 8 or 9
No,
million
no.
as
I
opposed to
mean,
like it could it hit
Well, no, it's not.
20?
I don't think it's gonna do 25. I think 15.
no, it's not going to. It's not going to do Megan. But
No.
best case for this is, yes, I think what Scott said was 12 to 15. I really think this could make $15 million.
Yeah, it's a crowded weekend though we've seen this year. That could help, that these things could piggyback on each other. And maybe the kids make this a big movie going next 4 or 5 days with Thanksgiving and the Hunger Games movie.
Mhm.
I guess I'm looking at it as just the IP, which is, making a movie out of the joke trailer from, almost 20 years ago. But I guess in the end, that doesn't matter. He just made this movie. It doesn't matter if you've ever seen the fake original trailer.
Yeah, I think we're past the idea that that is propelling this, because the
Right.
excitement for that probably dissipated in 2012 when we didn't see a Thanksgiving film.
Right.
So
Right.
I think we're past the fact that this is the uniqueness or the novelty of that. This used to be a trailer and now it's a full movie. I mean,
Right.
that was such a long time ago that you can't coast on that. You
Right.
could have in the late 2000s or the early 2010s, but now this has to be a spectacular movie. And like you were saying, Scott, I mean, the critics, and a lot of times for horror, critics don't matter, but when it comes to the people who don't
It
normally
helps.
go see horror movies, it definitely helps. So the gore hounds are there no matter what, but
Yeah.
it's other people that are saying like, hey, I'm going to go out of my way to see this, instead of, say, I don't know, what would be a good comp of a horror movie that sort of didn't do well recently.
The Pope's Exorcist, something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking.
There's a breakout sequel in the making.
I'm looking at the cast list for this movie, and yes, Addison Rae seems to be the star, this TikTok star. You got Rick Hoffman, who's an Eli Roth regular. Tim
Sexiest
Dillon,
man alive, Patrick Dempsey.
Gina Gershon, comedian Tim Dillon, and Jeff Fahey. So they're not going with stars in this. We'll say that. That's not what's going to help this break out is any movie stars. I don't think anyone in that list is going to be made.
But she is a star. She's not a movie star, but she is a star. It's like you are the one who came on here several episodes in a row and talked about Matt Pat. Okay. And
and Scott looks confused. He is a YouTuber who made a cameo in the 5 days. Okay.
My children.
He has kids. He knows he has kids.
He knows.
She has not broken out as a star in the movies, but she definitely is a known quantity. And if there is a level of, I don't know what her online thing is, but I know there's a lot of people who love her, a lot of people who hate her. If she gets killed in this movie, and this is a Paris Hilton type, let's see this person get murdered, that can drive traffic to the theaters.
So you're saying this is a Paris Hilton House of Wax. We want to go see her. Or they love her. I don't know. We don't know.
They might love her, and there might be people who hate her, but who knows? Maybe she survives. I don't know. I don't think she's the final girl. I haven't seen this film. But there is a level of, does she get killed? I mean, we knew Paris Hilton was going around saying, I get killed in this. So we knew that was coming.
Yeah,
this we don't know. It was yes, absolutely.
So last new movie opening this weekend. Wow, what a huge weekend. We've got a Taika Waititi movie coming out. Next Goal Wins. It stars Michael Fassbender. It's your, underdog sports coach, cool runnings type, bring a coach into an unfamiliar situation and he's going to get these losers to win. It's a soccer movie. So, Scott, this movie, how long has it been delayed? I mean, is this a movie that was supposed to come out in 2020, 2021?
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I have not followed the schedule of this one just because it's not my day-to-day obligation at the moment. But I do know it's been delayed countless times for one reason or another.
Does this feel like a complete toss off by the studio.
Yeah.
Is this Disney Fox? Is that what this is? This is Disney 20th Century putting this out?
Yeah, and again, the reviews are meh. It's not going to win any Oscars, so
Right.
that you lose it. And this isn't Jojo Rabbit, which was actually in the game and
Right.
won, and actually won awards. So yeah, this is the kind of movie that everybody says they don't make anymore, but when they do make them, nobody shows up. This was his one for me in between Thor films, and whatever.
Yeah. It does. This is the type of movie that is a movie without an island. I mean, a movie like this does have to be really good to get any kind of audience buzz. You're right. It's a movie that in the 90s probably makes double what it's going to make just by virtue of being a movie with a celebrity, with a movie, a known movie actor in the lead. Nowadays, a movie like this gets middling reviews. I mean, this could open to like $3 or $4 million, honestly.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, this will absolutely cry macho.
Wow. So you're saying under 3.5?
Well,
Wouldn't surprise
cry
me.
macho, I believe, was 4.
Okay.
Let's look at the exact cry macho.
Yeah, and Fassbender, and he has a big movie coming out at some point. I mean, I know he has The Killer on Netflix, but doesn't he have not Ferrari? Does he have some?
No, that's Adam Scott.
That's Adam Scott. Yeah, I mean,
Adam Driver.
Adam Scott, of course, is in. He was in the Madam Web trailer, of course. But yeah, Fassbender.
Wait, did I say Adam Scott? I meant Adam Driver.
Yes.
I'm tired. Sorry.
But yeah, Fassbender, I think this is just another movie in the line of Michael Fassbender is not going to be a movie star. And he's a great actor. We all love Shame, but
I've been saying since 2013.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Pat, that definitely has, that's already been sort of filed away as a non-starter.
Yeah. So I say we get into our top fives now and give our predictions for the weekend with dollar amounts on it. So Scott, as the guest, you have the choice of would you like to go first, second, or third in giving your predicted top 5 for this weekend?
Get it over with. Hold on.
Getting it over with. There we go. Rip the Band-Aid off, Scott, and give us your predictions for the box office weekend of Friday, November 17th. Do any of these movies open on the Wednesday, or are they all open on the Friday?
No, they're all opening screenings tomorrow night.
Got it.
I guess. Okay, obviously Hunger Games comes in number 1 with oh God. Should I be optimistic or should I be realistic? Optimistic, I say 55. Realistic, I say 45, but it has legs.
Okay.
Fuck it, 55.
Wow.
Yes.
All right. Austin having a little influence on the legend Scott Mendelson. Very nice. So then,
no, I mean it's good, and I hope you guys are right about how it's appealing to, the generation or two that was actually kids when these films first came out. Which, yeah, that's still generational nostalgia, but I'll take what I can get at this point.
So you got that at number 1. So where is the rest of
Trolls,
your top 5?
Number 2, let's say 25.
Okay.
Could go as high as 30, but it's almost, in terms of the those both will be successful results. Marvel's drops probably 65% with around 16 million, give or take. Then I guess Thanksgiving with let's go nuts. Let's say 15.
Wow. Okay.
And then either Next Goal Wins or Five Nights at Freddy's, both of which do around $4 million.
All right. Five Nights could stay in the top 5. Love that top 5 there. Clayton, would you like to go second with your top 5?
I would love to go second. Number 1, slam doink, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is going to make, I say, $52 million. But I agree, if it is lower, as long as it's not in the 20s or low 30s, I think this is a movie that the opening weekend is, going to not be as heavily loaded as, say, a Marvel's opening weekend, and not the Marvels, but a Marvel movie opening weekend used to be. But again, I do think it'll have legs. Number 2, Trolls Band Together. I think this makes I think rats need their cheese. I do think this makes 30.
Wow.
Underneath that, here's where I'm gonna get. Do you want to get nuts?
I knew you were gonna do this. Go for it.
Of course. Let's get nuts. Thanksgiving is gonna open to $16 million to be number 3. Number 4. I called an opening weekend that was Morbius last weekend for this movie. That did not happen. But the drop will be Morbius level, 71%. This thing is going to make $15 million in its second weekend. And then I think Next Goal wins. I mean, if it cries macho, that'll be 4.2. I think it cries macho, but I think Five Nights at Freddy's is going to overtake it with 4.5. So I think Next Goal Wins doesn't even make the top 5. Five Nights at Freddy's stays at 5.
Wow. All right. So obviously number 1, I got the Hunger Games. I'm going the most optimistic out of all of us. I think it hit 60. I think that this IP is still going to be strong with the tweens, teens, and 20-year-olds. I think that book has had some staying power. So I think that hit 60. Number 2 is going to be Trolls. I'm not as high on this as the opening weekend. I do think it's a kids movie, so it'll be leggy, but I think this could open as low as like 19. Honestly, I think it could. I just feel like the second movie may have damaged the awareness, and I think this is going to do 19 in the opening weekend. Number 3, I'm going the Marvels. The reviews have been good, and I think there's an okay feeling about this, and I think people go, and this will get over Thanksgiving, coming in number 4. I got Thanksgiving at like 13 million. I'm hoping to be wrong. Horror proved me wrong. I don't know. This one doesn't feel like it has much steam, but I got that at 13 million. And then number 5, I'm going to just go crazy and say Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the movie, jumps over Five Nights at Freddy's. Next Goal Wins is going to make like 2.7 million. That movie has just nothing going for it. So I think that's going to like come in like 7th or 8th. So yeah, that's my top 5. The last thing I want to get from you, Scott, before we go, just give us your 30 seconds on Killers of the Flower Moon and the adult movie coming off of Oppenheimer. Didn't really get that big bump, but does it matter? Do you think that Killers is sort of leveling out?
Short term, it doesn't matter because Apple knew what they were getting into, and Paramount made money before their first ticket was sold. But I mean, this is a 3.5-hour movie with no action, not a ton of violence, and what violence there isn't particularly fun. It's dark, it's depressing, it's a downer. DiCaprio isn't playing anything resembling a heartthrob, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a giant hit, but I do think it did as well as could be expected under the circumstances. And it's another testament to DiCaprio's star power, because there's nobody else on earth other than, I don't know, Sandra Bullock that maybe could have gotten this movie to this kind of money.
Right.
Right. Now, does this mean that Apple looks at spending $200 million on streaming movies and then partnering with a studio for theatrical release, of which they probably won't get much of that money from that anyway, and thinks maybe we shouldn't be doing that? I don't know. I hope not, because they can afford it. And that's sort of the plan between Apple and Amazon allegedly investing billions of dollars a year in theatrical movies because they know that theatrical movies do better on streaming than streaming movies.
Right.
We all know that. We should have, I and others have been screaming that since 2020, but I digress. But does that, it's because the streaming war is now very different than it was even a couple of years ago. I don't know if there's still going to be they're still going to have streaming originals that are budgeted like a theatrical feature, if not more so, because no one's getting paid in back end, with the knowledge that, they won't make any tangible money from it, but they hope that the theatrical nature of its existence will mean it's more watched on a streaming platform. And that will somehow create a variable that makes their quarterly statement look better and will make their stock go up.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
And
look
that's
at
the problem with the
Sony,
streaming era. This is all 3-card Monty.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's not a matter of, this film premiered on streaming and it got tons of viewership, and that means we win. Because as you know, what Wall Street thinks about a given studio is almost irrelevant in terms of what streaming content they had and how much that content was watched in a given quarter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we were goofing on the Craven trailer and the Madam Web trailer, but Sony has it right. Sony doesn't have a streamer. They have a deal with Netflix. So even if those movies tank at the box office, guess what's going to be the number one watched movie on Netflix when it drops? Craven and Madam Web. And they're making money. So they've cracked it.
Because even if that's not valuable to Sony in terms of this flop is now most watched on Netflix, having that movie is valuable to Netflix, which means Sony gets paid.
Right.
And this was, I said it at the time, this was a brilliant deal on their part. They get out of, they don't even enter the streaming war. They make money on the sidelines selling the guns.
Right.
Lionsgate kind of sort of too.
And one last super quick hit, The Holdovers. Is there, do you see any box office potential for that? It's coming at none.
I mean, it's supposed to be very good. I'm sure it is very good. It may end up in the Oscar race. That will obviously move the needle a little bit, but this isn't 2004. This isn't Sideways.
Yeah, it's also such a crowded next couple of weeks, and you have stuff like Napoleon. You have movies that are actually serving an older audience in the way that older audiences go to stuff like the Hunger Games, and and you have Napoleon coming out. So yeah, I wonder if maybe award stuff, if it could hold around, but it's that movie making like $2 million this weekend doesn't seem like it's going to add up to
Although
much
I'll
more.
admit I am pleasantly surprised by how well Priscilla has been holding. I think that one's already over $12 million.
Coppola holds.
Well, can I just give you one quick anecdote that we got boots on the ground reporting from Wannabe senior intern Christopher. He's at a screening of Priscilla tonight. He's in Pennsylvania, and in the same theater which he saw the Marvels that had 3 people over the weekend, he said there's about 30 people in that same screening room seeing Priscilla tonight on a Wednesday night. And he heard, and listen, he's with the college kids. The college ladies are talking about Jacob Elordi. He's hearing chatter. That is why they're there. So if you're looking for that Priscilla hold, obviously Sofia Coppola, but this Jacob Elordi is Elvis. And goddamn, Elvis is an IP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
it's if that is true, and I'll assume it is, that is the second time in 2 years that we've had an Elvis film that overperformed because of a male heartthrob that was, got his Nick's doing YA melodrama.
Yeah. I mean,
Austin Butler spent a lot of time doing Disney Channel, Nickelodeon type stuff.
Yeah.
And that isn't nothing.
Get
in terms
Elvis
of,
in the MCU.
Flying your trade, and in terms of becoming a heartthrob to a generation of people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Elvis is the part. Everyone's trying to be Captain Fantastic or Mr. Fantastic or be Batman. Elvis. That's the IP everyone needs to
we
be.
talk about Joker. Elvis could be the new Joker. Now, I know it's late and
we gotta go.
We gotta go, but Pat, we cannot not ask Scott about Acme versus Coyote. The whole thing that's happened with this, they are now reversing course. They're letting people bid on this thing. Other filmmakers have said, "Hey, Warner Brothers, we're canceling our meetings. We're out of it now because of this." What do you think of this situation? Is this damaged Warner Brothers for the future?
Yeah, and Batgirl didn't help, but at least there you had this confluence of circumstance that almost made it make sense. Now you had a film that allegedly didn't test well that was intended for streaming, but because it's streaming, everybody gets paid up front. It had a theatrical budget of like 70 to 90 million, but because it's streaming and, it had the production value of a $40 million movie. But this was a film that tested well, that was allegedly good. And again, it just goes back to the notion of the film was greenlit for HBO Max before Hollywood realized that, you can't do that for a film that's going to have no revenue. And Zaslav may be the devil himself, but he was ahead of the curve on realizing that. Because he's been out front since the beginning saying making big budget movies for streamers is stupid.
Right.
If you want, if we are making movies that will play in theaters with theatrical worthy production values, because we know that those films will do better on Max than, quality notwithstanding, stuff like Father of the Bride and The Fallout.
Right.
Or Steven Soderbergh's No
Sudden Movement. No Sudden Move.
No Sudden Move, thank you.
Yeah.
Which is a terrific film, but it's what it is.
I mean, you got to make a movie. If you're going to make a movie, make it for a movie theater, unless you're making a Long Island Lolita TV movie from 1994. I totally agree. But this Acme v. Coyote, you got to put it out. For them to have, Jerry Lewis vaulted this movie, it just was such a hornet's nest all the way around.
And whatever money they gain in terms of tax write-offs, again, because this is all about what's Wall Street going to say at a certain amount of point in time, it's you lose far more in terms of PR.
Right.
Well, that's what we were saying. It's like, if you want to save $30 million, if you're the kind of businessman who is going to treat movies the way Zaslav treats movies, then be in the porta potty business. Don't be in the movie business, because movie studios make movies and release movies.
All right.
And people who
your mic is gone into disaster mode. So we're going to wrap up there. Scott Mendelson, could you tell us where listeners could find you right now? Where could they find your work? Where should they follow you? Where should they get more Scott Mendelson?
I'm still at thewrap.com. I'm on X. I'm on Blue Sky. And that's that.
And of course, the BO Boys, emails theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on social media at the BO Boys Pod, Twitter, X, and TikTok. And of course, give us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and watch us on YouTube. And thank you, Scott Mendelson, for another amazing visit to the BO Boys. We thank you. And Clayton, I think that's all we got to say. I think that's it. So until next time, we'll smell you at the box